Now let's go from 0 to 100. Remember the story that I told you about how excited I was about how simple it was to register a WordPress plugin? All I had to do was go under the WP Contents Directory plugins and then create my own file, such as Casper's plugin.php, and then add a simple header, right? It says plugin name, Casper's plugin. Now if I go to the plugins list, I have my plugin showing up. How can we get there for our blocks? So if I was to go to posts, create a new post, and then from this block selector, how can we get our block showing up here so that we can insert it? Or from the shortcut selector, if I typed it like this. So for that, we need two things. We need to create our block.json file, and then we need to register that block. So let's look at how we can do it. So if I go back to our editor, remove that plugin that we no longer need, then we go into the WP Shout plugin folder, which is our scaffold or the starting point for all our work we're doing. So we still have the leftovers from the previous lesson when we looked at extending existing blocks. So we're going to go here, and this is where we're going to be adding our registration for now. So how does one register that block? So let's go register WP block and see there is a documentation as a developer resource that explains us with some nice visual diagrams that we have a server-side registration that we have to do like this, and then also something to do in JavaScript. So let's go through these one by one. So we're using the action called init or initialize to hook into the WordPress lifecycle. And what we're going to do is we're going to say when this init fires, then call WP shout register blocks. And now autocomplete is already suggesting what we need to do. So this is our callback function that gets called when this is triggered. And from there, we're saying register block type. Now let's add those blocks. So we can go and click on new file. Then within the new file, we can actually create directories as well. So it says blocks FAQ block.json is one that we need to do, right? And then for the other is blocks FAQ item block.json. So what is the minimum amount of JSON that we can put in here to make it work? So for that, we need a name. So this is a machine-readable identifier, unique identifier of our block. So we're going to say WP shout, which is our namespace. And then within it, we have the FAQ block. So we're not going to follow the suggestions for now. And then we're also going to use title because that's a human-readable kind of representation of this. That is also something that the WordPress will search for in the editor. So we've done this FAQ block like this. And then we're going to do the same thing for FAQ item. We're going to do name FAQ item, right? And then title is FAQ item. Okay, now we have the block.json files in place. Notice that this register block type, it actually calls the directory. So it references the magic constant, the current directory where this file is. So this here under the plugin directory. And then blocks/FAQ for this one and FAQ item for the other one. Now, notice that it does not include the block.json. And that's because if you look at the kind of follow through it, it will try and append that to this path because it knows that you're enqueuing a block. So you must have the block.json in there. So if I save this, save all the other files and go back to the browser, will that block show up? So I'm going to reload the page, go to add our block, type in FAQ. Still nothing, right? There is this pattern that shows up here, but our block's not being shown. So why is that? Remember, we said that we need to register the block in PHP, but also in JavaScript. So how do we do that? So for that, we need to create or rely on a block.json feature, which is there is an editor script that we can pass. So if we define this editor script where it can accept a script handle or an actual file path. So this path is relative. That dot means it's relative to the current directory. In this case, it's for the FAQ block. So if we then add an index.js file here, this will get now in queued whenever this block is rendered in the editor. That's where we can handle all the registration and bootstrapping of that block in the JavaScript land. So we have the PHP land that is responsible for knowing that the blocker exists, how to display it on the front end. And then we have the same or similar registry in JavaScript where we're dealing with the editor experience and potentially also some customizations there. Let's do it for the FAQ item as well and add an index.js file here. Now, what's the best way to test that it is included? We're going to do console log. Yes, FAQ block loaded. And within here, we're going to say item loaded, right? So now if I go back to our add post and then open up the inspector, as part of the console, we're now going to see these two messages printed out. Yay, success! That means our JavaScript is now being loaded as part of this page. That's great. So let's go back and see what was the actual code that we need to call. Notice that this is using the import syntax from this module. Now, this is a new type of syntax that is supported by some of the modern browsers, well, a lot of them, but then our script would need to be added as a JavaScript module to the page. But it is not the case, it's a regular JavaScript file. So WordPress actually provides all of these libraries, the ones bundled with WordPress core, as a global dependency that is available in the browser. So if here in the console, if we type in WP, we get a list of an object, basically, of all these modules that are available. So instead of requiring them as an external thing from a module like that, we can rewrite it in a different way. So we can say constant register block type and then WP blocks. Now, let's check if it exists in the console here as well. I'm going to type in WP blocks. It is available indeed. So that's a convention that WordPress core uses. Now we're going to call register our block, and we need to reference our name. So it is not my plugin. We have a different namespace, WP shout, and in this case, it is this FAQ block. So that's cool. Now we have specified this. Let's try and running it and see if that works. Now notice there is now an error. It says WP is not defined. That happens because our script, this one here, gets added to the page before WordPress core has managed to instantiate or define this WordPress global constant. So that's where dependencies come in. We now have to define this WP blocks as a dependency to our script so that it gets enqueued and added to the page first. So, and the way we can do it is through this magical file called assets.php. So index.asset.php, and then as a PHP file here, we can actually return an array of things we want to define as dependencies and also the version of our script. So in this case, this autocomplete is adding a bit extensive. We don't need all those things. So we're going to say, okay, give us as part of this dependencies equals WP blocks. Notice that this convention, if we looked at the JavaScript land, it is under the like a dot separated thing, but the actual handle of that file is WP dash blocks. So this is how we can then know that our script will be added after this one runs. Now, if we've done that and we still have this in place, the reference is still in there. Now we should be able to go here, refresh it, and no more error. Does that mean we're done? Okay, let's try it out. Yay! We have our FAQ block. So that's how you get to register the block, the bare bones amount of information that is required for WordPress to know that your block exists. So let's do the same for the FAQ item. So we added the index assets PHP. Let's just copy it over here because it has the same dependencies. And the registration is also the same, except that we're registering an item. Yes, the autocomplete is correct in this case. Now let's refresh the page. Oh, wait, So now we get an error because the identifier has been declared already, right? Because one of those scripts ran first and it defined this constant in the global context. So for that, we have to learn about one more thing, which is JavaScript code isolation. And the simple thing to do it is we type in a function. So let's call init FAQ block, something that is in the global namespace, right? We could actually prefix this with WP shout as well. And then we can type in this. And this should now register our FAQ block without interfering or changing the global context of this, because this definition or this variable now becomes available only in the context of this function. So let's do the same thing for the FAQ item. Let's just change it here. And obviously we need to rename the function as well, because we can't have those repeating. And the autocomplete is helping us here a lot as well. Now I've refreshed it. It looks promising, so no more errors. Let's try it out. Yay, we have both the FAQ block and FAQ item. So that's it. We've registered 2 of our blocks. Now, if I add it to the page, you'll see that there's nothing in there. There's nothing to render. If we pull up the outline, it is still there. Same with the FAQ item. So if I added FAQ item, it is nicely added, but not of that is rendered. So that's where these additional parameters come in. This is where we define edit and save callback functions that will then define how that component or that block is actually rendered in that block editor. So before we proceed with customizing and improving our block, let's look at how we can avoid this repetitive work of isolating our code from the global context and potentially relying on that modern code that was represented here in this documentation.